In April of 2003, a team of German archaeologists stood over a stretch of dry floodplain south of Nasiriyah in southern Iraq and looked at what their radar had pulled from beneath the sand. Not ruins. Not the scattered footprint of a ruined city. An entire urban landscape, preserved. Houses still standing in outline. Gardens. Canals threading between neighborhoods. And on the edge of the site, alone, oriented differently from everything around it, a structure that matched a description written down almost 4,000 years ago. 3 weeks later, the United States invaded Iraq. The team packed up. The excavation never happened. And whatever sits beneath the walls of the world's first city is still sitting there. The radar under the desert. The site was Uruk. That name matters, because Uruk is not theoretical. It is one of the most thoroughly documented ancient cities on Earth, the first true city by most serious definitions, home to perhaps 50,000 people around 3000 BCE, and a city that gave Mesopotamia its modern name. Iraq itself takes its name from Uruk. The German team had been working the surrounding terrain systematically, using ground-penetrating radar and satellite imaging to map what lay under the sediment. Southern Iraq's arid climate is a preservation engine. For 5,000 years, the desert had been burying Uruk gently, sealing it under layer after layer of dry earth. What the radar returned was not the ghost of a city but a city itself, caught in time. The team's archaeobotanist, Georg Fassbinder, described it in press materials as a kind of Venice in the desert, a sophisticated urban plan sitting intact, inches below the surface. And on the edge of that plan, where the ancient canal system had once carried water, the radar found something else. A structure distinct from the houses. Positioned where a river channel had been. Surrounded by the signatures of ancient hydraulic engineering. Consistent, Fassbinder told the BBC, with a very old and very specific description. What the epic actually says. I want to be careful here, because this story gets mangled in both directions. It gets inflated into a confirmed discovery of Gilgamesh's tomb. It gets waved away as fringe. Neither is accurate. Here is what the Epic of Gilgamesh actually describes. When Gilgamesh dies, his people divert the river that runs past Uruk. They build his burial chamber in the exposed riverbed. Then they return the river to its course. The tomb is sealed beneath flowing water, hidden, protected, preserved. The radar data showed a burial-sized structure on the edge of the ancient canal, with evidence of hydraulic work around it. That is not proof. It is a match specific enough that excavation was the only reasonable next step. Fassbinder did not claim the tomb had been found. He claimed the site deserved to be opened. The distinction matters, and it has been lost almost everywhere this story gets retold. The king on the list. To understand why any of this deserves attention, you have to understand that Gilgamesh is not purely a mythological figure. The Sumerian king list, the clay prism held today at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, which records the rulers of Sumer before and after the flood, names him. He appears as the fifth king of the first dynasty of Uruk after the flood, with a listed reign of 126 years. His father is called a demon. His mother is the goddess Nin-sun. That reign length is obviously not literal. But the man is embedded in the same administrative document that lists Sumerian kings whose historical existence has been confirmed by archaeology. He is there alongside them, treated the same way, counted in the same sequence. The epic itself describes him in terms that go further. 2/3 divine, 1/3 human. A body beyond the human norm. And something more interesting than any of that, knowledge that no other person on earth possessed. The text says he had seen the secret things, traveled to the ends of the world, and returned from distances no one else had crossed. It says he wrote what he knew on a tablet of lapis lazuli and sealed that tablet inside the foundations of the walls of his own city. The story beneath Genesis. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest narrative literature in human history. It predates Homer by 15 centuries. Clay tablets bearing portions of it have been recovered from sites scattered across Mesopotamia, and the most complete version, the standard Babylonian assembly of 12 tablets, came out of the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, excavated in the 19th century by the British archaeologist Austen Henry Layard. Layard shipped thousands of fragments back to the British Museum. An engraver there named George Smith taught himself cuneiform on his own time and spent years trying to fit the pieces together. In 1872, he read a passage he recognized instantly. A flood. A survivor building a boat. Birds released to find land. A resting place on a mountain. Smith, by the contemporary account, tore off his clothes and ran around the room. What he had just read was older than Genesis. The Sumerian flood survivor, Utnapishtim in the Akkadian version, Sayusadra in the older Sumerian, is the original. Noah is his literary descendant, inherited across centuries of textual transmission from the river valleys of Iraq into the Hebrew Bible. The foundational flood narrative of Western religion did not originate in Palestine. It originated here, in the mud and reeds of southern Mesopotamia, and it was already ancient when the Bible was being composed. The tablet in the wall. But the flood is only one episode. The larger arc of the epic is about a king who watches his closest companion, Enkidu, die, and sets out to escape the same fate. He passes through the mountain of the sun, the tunnel through which the sun god Utu is said to travel by night from west back to east. He crosses the waters of death. He finds Utnapishtim at the edge of the world, the one mortal the gods ever granted immortality, and he learns from him. He retrieves a plant of rejuvenation from the bottom of the sea. A snake eats it while he sleeps. He returns to Uruk with nothing in his hands. Nothing except what he had seen. And the epic is explicit about what he does with it. He writes everything down on lapis lazuli and places the tablet inside the foundation deposit of the walls of Uruk. Foundation deposits, objects sealed deliberately into the footings of ancient buildings for permanent preservation, are an archaeologically attested Mesopotamian practice. They have been found. They contain objects. The text tells us exactly what Gilgamesh put in his, the record of everything a man had ever learned at the edge of existence. 3 weeks in April. Now I want to be careful about the timing, because the timing is where this narrative warps most easily. The American invasion of Iraq began on March 20, 2003. The German radar announcement circulated in early April. The dramatic version of the story, military moves in to stop the dig, gets the sequence backward. The invasion was already underway when the world heard about the site. What is true is the consequence. The invasion ended any possibility of excavation. The security situation collapsed. Iraqi academic institutions were displaced. The infrastructure that had supported international archaeological work for decades simply stopped functioning. The radar had shown something. Nobody was going to be allowed to dig it up. Whether that matters depends on what you think the radar was actually showing. If it was an extraordinarily preserved Sumerian urban complex with a structure on its edge that matched the described burial place of the most famous king in Mesopotamian memory, then the interruption of that work by a war deserves to be stated plainly. Important things were not found. Important questions were not answered. That is not conspiracy. It is consequence. The museum in Baghdad. The same weeks the German discovery was being discussed, something else was happening 300 kilometers north in Baghdad. The Iraq Museum held roughly 170,000 objects, one of the most significant collections of Mesopotamian antiquity on Earth. Its holdings spanned 10,000 years of civilization in the region, Neolithic tools on one end, Babylonian administrative tablets on the other. Plenty of those objects had never been fully studied. Their existence was known to specialists. Their contents were not. Baghdad fell on April 9, 2003. In the days that followed, the museum was looted. Roughly 15,000 objects were taken. The investigation was led by Colonel Matthew Bogdanos, and what he found was not what the early report suggested. Some of the theft was clearly opportunistic, smashed display cases, visible items grabbed in a hurry. But another portion was not. Items were taken from secured basement storerooms. Those rooms required keys and a working knowledge of the building's internal layout. The theft, Bogdanos concluded, was not consistent with random looting alone. Some part of it was organized and specific. He was careful not to overstate it. He did not claim to know who the organized actors were or what, exactly, they were after. I am not going to overstate it either. What I will say is this: a collection of incalculable value was left unguarded at a moment of military action, and the theft that followed showed evidence of deliberate targeting mixed in with the chaos. Among the things held in that museum were Sumerian medical tablets, astronomical records, administrative documents from periods that had never been fully studied, and objects recovered from the foundation deposits of ancient Mesopotamian buildings whose contents had not been exhaustively examined. Foundation deposits. Like the ones in the walls of Uruk. What was left in the ground? So here is where it stands. The site the German team identified was never excavated. The preserved city beneath the sand was left in the sand. The structure at the edge of the canal, the one that matched the text, was never opened. The team went home. The war continued. The museum was emptied. Tablets that had been coming out of Iraqi soil for a century continued to disperse into private collections, illegal markets, and institutional repositories across the world, most of them still untranslated. Was Gilgamesh a real king? The king list says he was. The city he ruled is real and documented and partially excavated. The walls he built, the walls the epic invites a future visitor to inspect and verify, have been found. Some of the foundation deposits inside those walls have been located. They have not all been opened. The lapis lazuli tablet the epic claims he sealed inside has not been found. The landing. The opening lines of the epic speak directly to whoever will one day stand where Gilgamesh stood. Inspect the foundation. Examine the brickwork. Climb the wall. Look at the foundation deposit of lapis lazuli. It is a message written 40 centuries ago, aimed specifically at the future. The city is there. The walls are there. The foundation deposits are there, and not all of them have been opened. The oldest story ever written describes a man who saw the secret things, understood what he had seen, and took deliberate steps to make sure the record survived him. Whatever he placed inside those walls is either still inside them or it is not. In 2003, for 3 weeks, we had one real chance to go look. We lost it to a war that arrived before the shovels did. The question he wrote down for us 4,000 years ago is still sitting under the sand, waiting for someone to come back and answer it. Outro. If this story is the kind of history that stays with you, the kind where the evidence is still in the ground and the questions are still open, leave a comment with what you think is down there, and subscribe so you don't miss what we dig into next.